Welcome to Spooky Halls. On tonight's episode, like clockwork. Back during my school days, I used to be that one kid who would always show up about an hour late for each class. Nowadays, I'm never late for anything. I'm the most meticulous employee in my whole office. A lot of my coworkers ask me, "How do you do it?" I usually laugh it off and pretend to take it as a compliment. The truth is, I don't want to tell them what's spurring me on to such punctuality. It happened when I was in high school. As I already said, I was never on time. My teachers had already stopped trying with me. I don't know how I managed to always show up that late. Maybe I would just take too long getting ready at home or dawdling on my way to school. It was on a sunny spring day when this behavior would cease forever. I had gotten up late already, overslept due to watching one too many episodes of some cartoon show. With my parents out of the house, no one had been there to stop me. That morning, I actually made an effort to still try and get to class in time. The way from my house to the school would usually take me around 20 minutes on foot, maybe 15 if I run. After I'd been sleepily ignoring the ring of my alarm clock, I had exactly 25 minutes left until school would start. Upon realizing this, I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the bathroom, where I quickly brushed my teeth and hair before randomly throwing on some clothes. 15 minutes left. Obviously, I would have to skip breakfast today. I slipped into my shoes and made a break for the door. I was already halfway down the street when I realized I had left my bag with all my stuff I needed for class at home. Cursing, I turned on my heels and sprinted back to my house, where I hurried to unlock the door. I stumbled inside, grabbed my bag from the living room where I'd left it, and then made a beeline for the street again. Upon leaving, I caught one last quick glance at the clock on the shoe rack in the hallway. 13 minutes left. Dashing down the street, I was holding my bag in front of my chest like a windbreaker. I ran as fast as I could, the soles of my shoes drumming on the pavement, creating a weirdly hypnotic rhythm. Suddenly, I tripped over a small depression in the street, lost my footing, and fell face first to the ground. The bag flew out of my hands and slid over the pavement. I groaned in pain as I slowly pushed myself off from the ground and rubbed my aching chin. It took me a little while to get back to my feet and collect the loose items that had fallen out of my bag when I had dropped it. As soon as I had it all back together, though, I continued to jog the remaining part of the way. When I finally reached the entrance to the school building, I pushed open the door and realized in horror that the hallway was completely empty. I looked up at the large clock hanging from the ceiling. I was exactly 3 minutes late. Crap. I would need to get to class quickly. I had math, and I remembered my math teacher being extremely strict. Getting late to one of his lessons would mean trouble. That much was for sure. The classroom was in one of the upper levels of the building. I panted as I sprinted up the stairs. By the time I had reached the second floor, I was already out of breath. Still, I kept pressing on until I had arrived on the uppermost one. I hadn't encountered a single person on my way up. At first, this hadn't struck me as odd. I just assumed that everyone else was in their respective classrooms already. But when I knocked on the closed door of my destination and received no response from inside, I felt a little weird sense of dread rise within me. I knocked again, 3 times. Still no reply. Just silence. Like there was no one in there at all. I slowly reached out and pressed down the door handle. To my surprise, the room was empty. This was strange. If the lesson had been transferred to another classroom, this would have been locked. I decided it would be best to ask the teacher in the adjacent room about my class whereabouts. Yet, upon knocking, I once again received no answer. Opening the door, I found the room to be just as deserted as the original one. At this point, I was getting a bit spooked. What if there was some important event and I had missed it? A quick look on my calendar didn't yield any results, and when I tried the secretary's office for help, there was no one in there either. I was at a loss, so I took out my cell phone to call my friend and classmate Jane, who was also a student sitting next to me in math. To my increasing desperation, she didn't answer the phone. I decided I should probably head back home. What else was there to do after all? Climbing down the stairs to the ground floor, I tried to think of where everyone might have gone off to. Perhaps we had gotten a day off and I had simply missed it. Suddenly I was torn out of my thoughts by a familiar, yet also an unusual sound. The ticking of a clock. It was way too loud though, almost as if someone was holding their watch right to my ear from behind me or something. I started and spun around, but there was no one there. I was all by myself. The ticking didn't stop though. Glancing around, I proceeded down the stairs. I had already reached the second floor when I noticed that the noise was getting louder. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I swallowed. Where the hell was it coming from? Walking down the corridor to get to the staircase leading to the first floor, I picked up my pace. I was quickly marching now. I had no desire to investigate. While the sound itself shouldn't have creeped me out, its volume and apparent closeness sent shivers down my spine. Somehow I felt like the faster I went, the louder and quicker the ticking became, as if it was trying to keep up with me. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I found myself running down the stairs to the ground floor, my bag dangling from my rapidly moving arm by my side. I had stopped looking around. I didn't even want to know where the ticking came from at this point. I just wanted out. By the time I'd reached the main corridor which held the lockers and led up to the front door, I was full-on sprinting, my breathing hitching on once in a while. I was just a few meters away from the exit now. The ticking had grown unbearably loud. It was as if every single one of these small, short noises shook me to my very core. It was so fast now, too. It almost made my head spin. The large glass double doors offered me a look outside, the morning sun shining at me promisingly, illuminating the hallway with its bright, hopeful, warm rays. I was rushing towards it, but came to a slithering halt when all of a sudden one of the lockers to my left was thrown open from the inside. The creature that emerged from it was way too tall for it to have fit in there. Still, limb after spindly limb, it dragged itself out of the small metal box. I stared at it with wide eyes, mouth agape, as it rose to its full height. It almost reached all the way up to the ceiling. To this day, I can hardly describe it. It looked like a badly drawn stick figure that came to life. Its thin legs ended in a simple pointy stumps, and I have no idea how it could prop itself up with them. Its arms were just as skinny and gangly, and it ended in rake-like appendages. If I squinted, they looked sort of like fingers, but there were just way too many of them. Attached to its bony neck, there was a large, heavy-looking clock. The ticking sound was louder than ever before. I looked up at the creature in horror, and for a few seconds, I was too scared to even move at all. But when it moved its sickening spindle legs to take a step towards me, I dropped my bag, spun around, and took off down the hallway. I didn't know where to go. My mind was racing. It had been blocking the entrance to the school, the only means of escape I could think of. Where was I supposed to go? Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. The ticking came in much shorter intervals now. Enormous as it was, it could have probably caught up with me in no time if it hadn't been moving so clumsily. Looking back occasionally, I found that its steps were faltering, and it had to use its long arms to grab onto the walls for support. Its talons scraped against the stone and summoned an eerie scratching sound, which, mixing with the ticking, spurred me on to run even faster. Taking a turn, I stumbled past the rows of classrooms. I didn't know where I was going. The only thing I knew was that this spindly, large creature was still behind me, and steadily growing closer. Then, all of a sudden, one of the classroom doors was thrown open from inside. Just like the locker before, out came a second clock-headed creature, looking exactly like the one from before. It was standing right in front of me, blocking my path. I couldn't turn around, not with that other one still there.
So I did something incredibly daring. I still had a lot of momentum from sprinting all the way. So when I threw myself to the floor, I actually managed to slither through the space between the legs of the clock person. It pointed claws, only missing me by an inch or two as I scrambled to my feet on the other side and continued to run, glancing over my shoulder. I found that it had its difficulties turning around. The first one had caught up and was standing right behind it, seemingly waiting for the other one to get out of its way. I hastily stumbled up the sets of stairs. The ticking grew a bit fainter as I brought more distance between myself and the clock people. Still, I didn't dare slow down. I was panting heavily and my sides were burning. I had long lost sight of my bag, my cell phone way out of reach. I was panicking. What was I to do? I couldn't leave. I couldn't call for help. Maybe I could hide somewhere. The first spot that came to mind were the restrooms on the floor I was currently on. I instantly made a beeline for them and almost ran straight into the door of the girls' bathroom. I quickly shut it behind me and I rushed over to one of the expectantly empty stalls. I locked the door behind me and set down the toilet lid, hugging my knees and burying my face against my thighs. It was only when the wetness of my warm tears began soaking through the fabric of my shirt that I noticed that I had started to cry. I stayed as still and quiet as possible, hoping, praying that they wouldn't find me. If they would, the cheap stall door sure wouldn't offer me much protection. With my eyes pressed shut, I listened intently for the ticking. At first, everything was silent. Then, from no direction in particular, I could hear it, ever so faintly. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. It was slower this time, more deliberate. They were looking for me. My blood froze as the low creaking of the restroom door beginning open penetrated my ears. I held my breath. The sound of stick figure limbs scraping onto the tile floor nearly caused me to whimper in fear. I looked up from my knees only to see long, bony rake fingers reaching out underneath the door from outside. They were groping and feeling about, searching for anything indicating my presence. One of them came unnervingly close to my side, and I had to lean over to avoid coming in contact with it. The ticking was loud and clear, but still very slow. I prayed this meant that the creature wasn't on alert. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of watching the rake fingers moving about below me, they were pulled back. The creature remained in the bathroom a little longer yet, and I could only assume it was checking the other stalls. Then, to my great relief, I sluggishly turned around and went for the door, letting it fall shut behind it. I stayed put for a few minutes, waiting for the ticking to fade into the distance. When I was certain it was far enough away, I carefully got up from my seat and snuck out of the bathroom, peeking out into the hallway. I found it empty, deserted. As quiet as I could, I made my way over to the staircase. I was just about to set foot onto the first step, already anticipating freedom once I reached that front door. Then that awful noise hit me again. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. It came in short, rapid intervals this time, loud but fast. Somehow I knew that meant that they had found me, even before the two clock people appeared below me in the stairwell. I whirled around, once again starting to run. My only option now was the third floor, where I had looked for my class earlier. The two of them were right behind me, the sounds of their ticking heads damn near driving me crazy. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks again as the burning pain flared up in my exhausted body once more as I was pushing it, myself, to its very limit. Stumbling up the stairs, I could only think of hiding in one of the empty classrooms. Sprinting towards my math classroom, I tore open the door and dashed inside, only to collide with a person. A normal-sized, fleshy, warm person. I barely had time to recognize the pleasantly familiar eyes of my teacher before blackness enveloped me and I passed out. I came to in the hospital. My teacher was there and told me he had called my parents on the phone to let them know I had suffered a panic attack of sorts and lost consciousness. He said they were on their way. He had to leave pretty much right away since he couldn't leave the class without supervision any longer than he had already. The class! I remembered muttering weakly. Were they there? Of course, my teacher said, frowning confusedly. They were all present, except for you. But I checked earlier, and I couldn't find you, or anyone, I argued. My teacher smiled warmly and shook his head, telling me it had all probably just been in my head. I think he was barely even listening. I didn't blame him, though. I thanked him for helping and staying with me, and shortly after that, he left. Apart from the nurses checking in on me once or twice every 15 minutes, I was all by myself. I just laid there, waiting for my mom and dad to arrive. I was left alone in this clean, white room with no sound but the occasional beeping of the digital alarm clock beside my bed. I never told anyone what I saw. I knew it had been real, or at least as real as something like that could have been. Of course, the doctors found some sort of explanation for it, although I can hardly remember what it was. It was just so long ago. I do remember the clock people, though. I hadn't seen them ever since. But the images of them prowling through the corridors on those thin, spindly legs and the persistent sound of their ticking has never left me. Ever since that day, I've done everything I could to avoid another encounter with them. I'm never late for anything, even if it means I have to get up hours before the actual time I'm needed. Even if it means I can't go back for stuff I've forgotten at home or to go to the toilet. No daddling. No more wasting time. I come in like clockwork. Each day, every day. Thank you for listening to this episode of Spooky Halls. If you have enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out our other videos and hit that big red juicy subscribe button. We would love for you to be a subscriber so that you can be notified anytime we post new videos. Thank you and good night.